So you find yourself with an underperforming employee. That's Shane, and you're wondering what to do next. Well, one of the crucial questions to start with maybe is this. Does this employee somehow lack the right commitment, or do they somehow lack the right work ethic? Now, we kind of think they're the same thing, but they're not, and more will be explained. So if you're a leader, well, at least one with a head screwed on, you only want people on your team that have both things, high commitment and a high work ethic, right? Yeah, of course. Well, we, like you, call these particular individuals dedicated achievers. So I'm Antonio, and today I'm going to be your leadership coach. So let's me and you take the next 30 to 45 minutes, sit down together and figure out how you can attract, retain, and nurture and develop these dedicated achievers. And this way, you can finally begin to stop managing and start leading. Before we get into our models today, and of course all of the models that we draw are available as a complimentary digital download, give you more about that later. We're going to do two models today. One is a sort of a revisit to finish off a previous model. So if you like what you see and you haven't seen those, go back to them. And there's a new model I'm going to share with you today. But before we do that, let's just think about this. Think about who on your team, right? So think about the people that report directly to you. We'll just start with that for now. But who on your team has high commitment, right? Who are the committed individuals? So I'll give you a second just to think about who your committed individuals are, and I'll have a sip whilst you write down their names. That'll be helpful. Now, typically when we talk to our clients and our customers and we ask them to list the people that are the most committed, here's what we tend to hear. They'll give us a name and we'll say, okay, well, why George? Why Mike? Why Mary? Why did you mention those people? What makes you think they are high in commitment? And then we'll hear things like, maybe you're thinking about this now, we'll hear things like, well, they're the ones that entirely you can rely on. When you need somebody to step up, it's always George. When you need somebody to go over and above, it's always George. When I ask for a volunteer, George's hand goes up first. When I send an email at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, by the way, stop sending emails at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. But when I do, George is always the first to respond. When I ask for volunteers, it's George. When I ask, can anybody do this extra small thing for me? George always volunteers. So we think about the Georges of this world and we think, well, those are the guys that are committed. And here's what I want to introduce you to today. The principle that George has high work ethic, but how do we know that he has high commitment? Because high work ethic is not the same thing as high commitment. All of the things that I just talked about are as a consequence of work ethic. So what's work ethic? Well, work ethic is somebody that believes that there is virtue in hard work. Most of us, when we were 6, 7, or 8 years old, we all kind of got the scripting that said, work hard, keep your nose to the grindstone, do what people ask you, and good things will happen. So most of us have this principle drummed into us that, work hard and good things will follow. That's work ethic, right? We are prepared to go over and above in terms of time. We believe that there is value in hard work. We believe there is virtue in hard work. And all of the things that I just talked about, we're talking about George. So that's work ethic. But how's commitment different from work ethic? Well, commitment isn't just a preparedness to put in the hours occasionally. Commitment is much more about doing the difficult things that are going to be required to make genuine progress. So commitment is a preparedness to go way outside your comfort zone, to do the difficult things that are going to be required to move the flag down the beach. That's not the same thing as work ethic, is it? Work ethic, some people might say, yeah, but putting all those hours in, that's a commitment. No, that's still work ethic. It only flips over into commitment when it expands or stretches comfort zones. Those people with high work ethic, whilst they might complain about the hours, and listen, we shouldn't be burning out our people in terms of hours, but they're working hard, but that's still within their comfort zone, or it doesn't stretch beyond the comfort zone into doing the difficult things. The difficult things, or the preparedness to do the difficult things, which is a big stretch outside our comfort zone, that's what commitment looks like. It's doing the difficult things. Work ethic, for people with high work ethic, putting the hours in is not that much of a stretch outside their comfort zone, although it's an inconvenience. What I want are people who are committed, people who are dedicated to doing the difficult things to get the right things done. Okay, so if I had to choose between work ethic and commitment, and of course I don't, but if I did, I would take commitment every day over work ethic. And it goes back to so many of the videos we're talking about, working on the business versus in the business. There's no growth in your comfort zone. There's no comfort in your growth zone, and all of those good things. Well, some videos ago, we talked about, I think it was episode 13, but don't quote me on that. We talked about, leadership, for leadership to be stalled, for the organization to be stalled, for the goals to be stalled. It's as a consequence of 6 or 7 lacks, L-A-C-K-S, right? Deficiencies. And we drew a model called the leadership honeycomb. So I'll show you what that looks like in a second, just fleetingly, but I'm going to ask you to download that model, and that's available, as I mentioned, as a complimentary download at all the W's, that's www.mydailyleadership.com/podcast. Cornelia, our amazing designer, she takes all of the nasty diagrams that I draw in these kind of episodes, and she makes them all look beautiful. So I'll show you very roughly what my hand-drawn model looked like of the leadership honeycomb, but go to the download and have a look at what it's supposed to look like. And then we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about a new model I'd like to introduce you to. So let's just have a quick look at the thing that I drew all of those episodes ago. Here's the model that I drew. And we said that, if the business is stalled or it's not going quite as quickly as we want it to, it's probably as a consequence of a lack in more than one place, potentially. So it may be a lack of clarity or vision, right? As I say, Cornelia's done a much nicer one that you can download, right? So it may be a lack of clarity or vision, and we've had a video, an episode just about that. So if that's one of your issues, go check that out. It may be as a consequence of lack of trust or truth. Go check that one out. It may be as a lack of alignment. It may be as a lack of time. It may be as a lack of resources, which most people say, yeah, it's that one. But actually, when we dig into it, it's lots of the other things. Or this principle of a lack of commitment. What does a lack of commitment, how does that manifest itself? As we mentioned when we first introduced ourselves to the leadership honeycomb, that lack of commitment reveals itself in high turnover. So if you have high turnover as a consequence of burnout and so on, right? That high turnover may be a lack of commitment. It may be inconsistent effort, right? So up and down and up and down and up and down. It may be that there is some kind of lack of ownership in individuals or your team and groups, and maybe even silos, which we don't like, but you get the idea. Or a fractured culture. So we need to think about, we're going to dive into it today, what do we do about this lack of commitment? How do we deal with those things? Well, the solutions are fairly self-evident, because what would you do with a lack of commitment? Well, obviously we want to inspire with our vision, mission, goals, KPIs, all of that kind of stuff. Now, there's a difference, and I'm sure you recognize it. There is a huge difference between just sticking our vision, mission, goals, KPIs, all of that good stuff, and maybe some, inspiring quote from some genius or other and just sticking those on the notice boards all over the place. Well, there's a difference between just doing that and actually inspiring those things. So a lot of the clients that come to us, they actually need help in just that very, very issue. It's like, how do we take all of that information and how do we inspire people with it? Because, an inspired bunch of people, they can get very committed when they want to, right? So there's inspiring with vision. You might want to, as a really good starting point, I think, go and have a look at Simon Sinek's Start With Why, right? If you don't know what that is, just Google that, stick that into search engine and YouTube, Start With Why. That'll give you some indication of what we're talking about in terms of inspiring the vision. We need to know what the why. This is our vision, this is our mission, these are our goals, but why? Who are we trying to serve? What are we trying to achieve, right? We have to figure out how to describe those things in a powerful and compelling way because we want emotional buy-in. One of our rules, one of our laws here at our organization that we help our clients with is a principle: don't say much, but say it all over the place and in 1,000 different ways. Let me say that one more time. Don't say much, but say it all over the place and in 1,000 different ways. This is one of those things that we don't say much. The not much is what's our vision and mission, right? Say those things all over the place. That means at every opportunity, to every group that you can find in 1,000 different ways. That means say it this way, then say it that way, and say it another way, right? Because people learn and understand things differently. I think there was some research that I was looking at a couple of months ago that said we have to say something 22 or 23 or 24 times, the same kind of message before people get it. So sometimes some of our clients will say, well, we told them what our vision was. And then we said, so everyone's really clear. They know what their objectives are. Oh, of course. They know what your mission is. Indubitably, they would say. And then when we ask them all individually, and we say, what are your top 3 goals? What's your vision? What's your mission? What are your objectives, KPIs, and all of that? We'll ask 10 different people and we get 10 different messages. So they absolutely have not got that message. You cannot overstate it. That's why we want you to say it all over the place in 1,000 different ways. Some people learn it one way, some people learn it another way. And that means that really whatever it says on your business card, so maybe CEO for example, it really should be CRO. And I don't mean Chief Revenue Officer, although they're very important too, close to my heart. I mean Chief Repeating Officer. Okay, so one thing is the way that we inspire the vision is we communicate the why and say that why all over the place in 1,000 different ways. Recognize contributions, okay? Because another law of ours is what gets rewarded gets repeated. So recognize people's contributions. Celebrate their successes very publicly. We all love league tables and all of that kind of stuff, right? So celebrate individual efforts. What gets rewarded gets repeated. Typically, when we're talking to our managers and leaders, let's take an average employee, right? So on average, the Himalayas are flat. We know that. But the average employee, they'll do, let's say, 60% average work. Let's say they do 20% brilliant work. And then let's say they do 20%, did I get my maths right? Yeah. Subpar work, not very good work. What we typically do is we concentrate on that bottom 20%. That's where we focus all of our time, effort, and attention with our individuals, on that bottom 20%. But you know what? Why don't we concentrate more on that great 20%, the top 20%? Because if we can turn that 20% into 25% and take it off the bottom, that would make a huge difference, where all of our A players are now becoming A+ players, and our B+ are now becoming A players. You get the idea, right? So what gets rewarded gets repeated. Recognize the contributions of those people with high commitment, not high work ethic. Okay, great. Another one. Encourage autonomy. What do we mean by that? Well, nobody wants to feel micromanaged. And we've got lots of mechanisms for encouraging autonomy, not least management by exception, few most important KPIs and all of that kind of stuff. That's probably a video for another day, but encourage autonomy. Give your people ownership of the work that they're doing. Agree with them what the parameters look like such they need to come to see you and talk to you if they're falling behind or even going super far ahead. And agree all of those check-ins. What do the early milestones for success look like? All of that good hygiene stuff, right? But don't micromanage them. When people are micromanaged, nobody wants to be micromanaged, of course. When people are being micromanaged, then that leads to a lack of commitment, doesn't it? It did for you when you were younger, and it does for them and everybody else too. Number 4, foster engagement. Let's foster engagement. How do we do that? One of the best ways to foster engagement is to coach your people regularly. I'm always amazed, like staggered, when we talk to our leaders, right? We talk to the exec and we say, write down the names of the people that work for you, report to you directly. And then they'll write George and Mary and Tom and Peter. That's okay, great. Now write down the last coaching call that you had with them, the last coaching session, not the last management session, not the last training session, not the last check-in session, not the last one-to-one, specifically a coaching session. And if I were to ask that other person about that event, they would be very clear in their head that it was specifically a coaching session. You would be staggered, dismayed, dumbfounded at how few coaching sessions our leaders have with their direct reports. Well, that's a key way of engaging commitment from people, fostering engagement and so on. So regular one-on-ones, sure. Regular management meetings, sure. Regular check-in sessions, sure. I'm talking coaching sessions. Coaching is a way to engage your people. Okay, cool. So that's all that being said. And now we're going to have a look at today's model. But just before I dive into today's model, I just want to take a quick pit stop and just refuel, refresh, and recharge. Now, whilst you're doing that, I've got three quick things I'd like to chat to you about before we continue with today's model. First, for those of you new to the podcast, well, where have you been? No, welcome. I'm Antonio Garrido. I'm the founder and president of My Daily Leadership. I just need to tell you something really interesting, and I know I'm going to get in trouble for going off-piste. I went last week to the UK. So it was bonkers. I was flying through Paris and I was in the Air France exec lounge, whatever that's called. And who should I see but a client of mine, right? Just coincidentally, he was helping himself some cheese at the cheese counter. Well, it's France and they're big on cheeses, right? And we were talking. I hadn't spoken to him for a little while. And he was telling me how he was really enjoying these sessions, these podcasts and so on, and I thanked him for that. I said, don't tell me, tell other people. And he then went and sat down and he emailed an introduction to me to that person to say, hey, check out this guy. So that was really nice. Okay, great. 4 days later, I'm flying back, this time out of Manchester, flying in towards Paris. And who should I see? A guy called Lee. Hi, Lee. Lee was telling me how much he really, really enjoys these sessions. And I was saying, don't tell me, tell somebody else, right? So I know Lee will get to see this eventually. So hi, Lee. It was lovely to meet you again the other day. All right, so a little bit about me. So I'm a serial entrepreneur, business founder and leader, just like you. I'm a 3-times author. I'm about to be a 4-times author with my daughter Alice. Get to that another time. And I've led businesses from ground level startups all the way to Fortune 60s with billions in revenue and thousands of employees. Now, we've designed this podcast specifically to give you hopefully real value and really good return on investment for your time and effort, right? Now, we know you're super busy. We're all super busy. So we try and make sure that you leave each and every one of these episodes with, some kind of practical model, a little bit like the one we just talked about and the one we're going to talk about in a minute, and some insights that you can apply to your everyday leadership challenges right away, we hope. Which brings me on to my second agenda item. If this episode is resonating with you and you've had at least one aha moment already, and I hope you have, please do take a moment to like this video and do subscribe to our channel on YouTube or follow us on your preferred podcast platform. Your support genuinely means a lot to us, and it allows other people to reach us, and that means we can affect and reach more and more leaders just like you. We have a mission to reach 1 million, so we've got a way to go. Actually, we're doing pretty well, but anyway. And whilst you're down there, liking, subscribing on YouTube, tell us your current biggest leadership challenge in the comments. Genuinely, please do. We do get some of them. We'd like more, because then we will either point you towards a relevant episode, or if we don't have one yet, we will create one specifically for you. We genuinely will. So please do that. We really will respond to each and every comment. Third, final thing, I promise, we've got a book. It's the My Daily Leadership book. It's My Daily Leadership, a powerful roadmap for leadership success. It might look and sound and smell and taste like any other leadership book, but trust me, it isn't. This one's different, not just because I've written it, but it's packed with exercises and journal prompts. It's designed to guide you through every step of your leadership development journey. Do check it out. And most importantly, I suppose, this book will help you build a daily habit of self-improvement and leadership development. Okay, that's gorgeous. Okay. Back to today's lesson. Let me get my pen ready, and we're going to draw a new model. Just a very, very standard 4-box model for those that are listening to this, and we'll download this later, of course, right? So let's think about work ethic, which is what we've been talking about, work ethic. And obviously we have those with a low work ethic, and we have those with a high work ethic. And by the way, you can assess for all of this kind of stuff, you know, in the same way that you can assess for growth mindset, fixed mindset, and all of that good stuff. So if you want any help with that, reach out to us as well. We'll help you with that. So we have work ethic, low and high, and then we have level of commitment. So let's go level of commitment. Again, low. Doesn't take a genius to figure out that. So I said earlier, listen, I want people with a good work ethic and a good level of commitment, right? I want those rock stars. And when we're trying to, recruit new people, we should be recruiting people with a lens on how do I figure out whether this person has a good work ethic, and how do I figure out whether this person has a high level of commitment to doing those difficult things, right? So an interview, we'll talk about this in some other episode, no doubt, soon. If you want to know more about that, let us know, and we'll do it sooner than perhaps we'd planned. So an interview is really, it's a 3C assessment. I'm actually going to say 4 Cs, and I can be stretched to saying 5 Cs. I'll talk more about those in a second. But at its most basic level, the 3C assessment is capability, credibility, and chemistry. So capability, are they capable of doing the job? How do you know when you're interviewing them? You don't. So you have to get an assessment, right? So again, talk to us if you need any help with that. Credibility, well, that's easy to spot, because it's like, where have they worked? What results have they had? Where was their education, right? What kind of language do they speak? In other words, do they know the language of your particular market, right? That credibility piece, that's easy to spot in interview. And then we have the chemistry piece. That's hard, right? Because sometimes the most amazing presentation they ever gave was in your interview, then you give them the job and suddenly they're dreadful, right? So that chemistry piece is all about culture. It's all about core values. So those are 2 other C's that you can test for. And then the last C, depending on the role, is capital. How do they manage money and resources and all of that kind of stuff, right? But at its most basic level, capability, credibility, and chemistry. What we find oftentimes is people hire to the chemistry piece. They think that's the most important. That's the least important, right? So how do you figure out this level of commitment and work ethic in an interview situation setting? It's tricky. That's why we have so many C players and B players that we were convinced were going to be A players when we interviewed them. Anyway, conversation for another day. So we want people obviously with high commitment and high work ethic. We want people who are high in willingness and high in ability, of course. So willing and able, different conversation. Let's just think about level of commitment and work ethic. What would you call somebody who had a high level of commitment and a high work ethic? Well, we call these guys dedicated achievers. Now, these are our A players, obviously, right? And we want lots and lots and lots of these. Is everybody a dedicated achiever on your team? Yeah, possibly, but probably not. And if one of those people happens to leave, right, through either good fortune or you've decided to let them go, which is good. I hope that happens often, except to say that every time we fire someone, every fire is a failure, because it means we've made a mistake on the front end, perhaps. So we don't want you to fire people, but if we do have C players and they're not making a change to become a B player, because it's either beyond their capabilities or beyond yours, then they kind of have to go. And then when you bring somebody else in and you hire an A player, a dedicated achiever with high work ethic and high commitment, obviously the quality of everybody, right? The raising tide lifts all ships, right? So we want lots of these guys. And if your team is populated with not lots of these guys, you have to act. One of our principles is accept, change, or terminate. Act. Well, can we accept? No, so that's not out. So then we've got to change. We either change them by coaching, or we change what they do for a living. Maybe your organization needs some more forklift truck drivers. I don't know. But if we can't accept, we can't change them or what they do, then they have to go. We have to terminate. It's no good to have 3 or 4 C players on your team that have been around for 6 months, 2 months, 5 years, 8 years. That's not acceptable. That's unacceptable. Do you know one of the very, very best ways to cheese off your A players is to accept nonsense from your C players? So even if only today you make the decision that I'm going to do something about getting rid, fixing or firing those C players, and then I'm going to bring in some real high dedicated achievers, A players, and raise the tide for everybody. Okay, great. So that's what you would call those guys. What would you call somebody in here, and maybe in quadrant 1? High level of commitment, low level of work ethic. Well, I'm going to call them maybe passionate, maybe, but if anything, visionaries. And you know what? These guys, it's not hard to move them over here. It comes back to that inspiring that we mentioned earlier. What are these guys called down here? Low level commitment, low work ethic. Well, we're going to call these guys casual participants. I often just call these spectators. These are your C players, obviously. Now, I don't know about your organization. I can only speak to the ones I own and run and organizations I've run in the past. I don't know how much deadwood you're comfortable to carry. And me, not so much, right? So I'm not interested in spectators. Those guys that go to the football game on a Sunday or a Monday and they're sat in the crowd and they're screaming advice to the best athletes on the planet, but they never quite get off the sidelines and put the boots on and get on the field themselves. We're going to do a whole video about that, one of my favorite topics. I don't know when, but I'll make sure that that Cornelia schedules one in. Right? These spectators, these guys have to go. Okay, what about high work ethic, low level of commitment? These are the guys that we think are the RA players, but they're not actually. These are our B players as well. And these are, they're consistent, right? And there is something to do with consistency. So I do like them for their consistency, and they're contributors. And again, we have to figure out how to move these B players over here. We have B player here too. Right, and then these guys, remember, accept, change, or terminate. And that's, again, a whole different conversation for a whole different day. Well, I hope that makes sense. I know we've run out of time, so I think that's probably all for today's episode. But before we wrap up, genuinely, I'd love to hear from you. So after watching this episode, tell me this. Do you think the underperforming employees you're thinking of, so whoever you're thinking, George, remember George, A, lacks commitment, B, lacks work ethic, or C, unfortunately, lacks both. So the person you're thinking of, that underperforming employee, is it A, lacks commitment, B, lacks work ethic, or C, unfortunately, lacks both? Whichever one it is, it's your fault. But anyway, let me know your answer in the comment. Leave me an A, a B, or a C. I'm curious to see where most of you stand on this issue, so let's find out. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope it was worthwhile. I do hope this episode offered you something of value, even if it's just one tool, one tip, or something that improves your leadership ability by only 1%. 1% every day, consistently, massive improvement over time. Remember, there is immense power in marginal gains consistently applied over time. Compounds. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe for more episodes exactly like this. And in the next episode, we'll chat about what leadership lessons we can learn from Stoicism. That's the Marcus Aureliuses of this world, the Senecas, the Epictetuses, if that's even a word, the Stoic philosophers who understood leadership long before business schools, or even you and I, even existed. Together we'll explore their timeless wisdom and see what they can teach us about leadership today. So that's it. I'm Antonio Garrido with My Daily Leadership. Thanks for being here. Love you lots like jelly tots. Until next time, by wisdom and effort. Take care.